Welcome back, listeners, to the T.R.O.N podcast, The Randomness of Nothing. This is your host, Rashad Woods. It's always a pleasure of mine to be able to introduce and speak with subject matter experts across their field of work, and nothing encompasses this more than the guest I have today, Laura Berman Fortgang, a motivational coach, master credential coach, public speaker, and interfaith minister as well, too, and how you reach the best version of yourself, stop procrastinating. She's a pioneer in her field, and I'm honored to have her today as a guest. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've accomplished a lot, and I was looking at your bio, and you found out really early what you wanted to do, and you're a pioneer in your field too. In when it came to master credential coaching, so can you please give us some information about your background?
Sure. I mean, it wasn't a plan. It was, actually my career success came out of a career failure. So my parents would not let me be a theater major in school, but all I wanted to do was be on stage and perform. So when I graduated college, that was a blessing to have a college degree, but I moved to New York City, which was home for me. So, near home. So it wasn't like a big stretch. And I pursued a Broadway theater career.
Yes.
And I put a decade into that, and it was relatively successful. Like I got into the acting union, and I was doing all right, but I was still waiting, still waiting on tables, and had given myself 5 years to have an agent, and it was year 8, and I still didn't have an agent. So I, blah blah blah. I had a major nervous breakdown, major depression, lost 3 years of my life to being incapacitated. But when I came out on the other side, thank goodness I did not harm myself, right? Because I thought about it, but I came out on the other side, and I had this intuitive instinct that I needed to call this old mentor of mine. And he had been an acting mentor. And so I listened, I called him, and he had become a coach, and I never heard of such a thing, but I became a client. So I was a client trying to figure out what's my next move going to be.
Yes.
And this all happened like at the burgeoning beginning of, we know of life coaching, we know of corporate coaching, everything now.
Yes.
But I started when people were like, what team? Soccer? You're a soccer mom? What are you?
Right.
And I was so fortunate. I mean, just right place, right time, showing up 100%, and ended up being on Oprah and 5 books, and
Absolutely.
yeah. Oh, so all these wonderful things that happened to me, like it wasn't a plan. It was being in the showing up 100%, knew I had found something that changed my life, and wanted to share it with other people. So that's a story. I hope it wasn't too long.
No, it's amazing, because oftentimes we keep waiting, and I saw one of your clips. People wait for the perfect time, right? The perfect time, because they map out, they plan out, and then it actually never starts, right? And because either fear, self doubt. But when you reached a moment where you said, "I need to get through this," and fortunately, you didn't harm yourself, you found clarity and purpose. And so I think that, one of the people that I talked to that are, very successful in the show, they all have very similar backgrounds when it comes to, they had self-doubt, but they found that inner voice that said, "I'm going to go through." And I thought that was very, very poignant for you to share that story as well, too.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, it was like I had no choice, it was right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I put one foot in front of the other, but with full commitment, full commitment. I'd already been through something worse than trying to put yourself out there. And also having been an actor, it wasn't so much that, I acted my way through it, but it was like, I'd already been through rejection. I'd already been through,
Yes,
you
that
know,
helps.
having no control over the results in your life. So I was like, this is nothing. This is easy.
So you help businesses, you've gotten to the coaching career, and you've helped some, NASA, World Bank, Army Corps of Engineers. I mean, I was just going down the list, and I'm like,
Yep.
this is absolutely stellar that you've been able to, coach, teach, and be around those organizations, and give them your insight and expertise. But when you first got into the field, it wasn't very prevalent. What was it like in the early stages of being a coach, and then seeing it accelerate over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I got into it from the life coaching aspect of it, but life coaches like were getting made fun of right away. So I thought this is really good for corporate. So before I had competitors like every big consulting firm and everything, I literally spoke for free in the gym, at the lunch and learn, at at a major corporation, and a manager had come to my free lunch and learn and said, I need you for my team.
Wow.
And that's how I got my first corporate paycheck to teach and to coach in an organization. And I leveraged that, then you call the next company, you go like, hey, I'm working over at, such and such a place. You need me. So I actually had a lot of success in big companies and big organizations before it got saturated. Once it got saturated, I started working with small business owners. Like I work with small business owners now to help them grow their business. But my early career, like the first, 15, 20 years was corporate and executives. And I still coach executives if they find me.
Yeah.
But I also still teach coaching skills. You know what I mean? Like the skill set itself is a great skill for managers and leaders. So I still have my hand in a lot of pots, but my main focus now is other small business owners like myself and help them grow their business.
I always found it fascinating, and I was curious about that when you pivoted, because it doesn't help to be with, obviously it's a very saturated market, when it comes to those larger firms that have, contracts and deeply embedded relationships and things like that. But also when it comes to small businesses, they may think that they don't have the resources available, and oftentimes they're family owned, and it's almost like your brother-in-law is the accountant, so to speak, right? And I'm not dissing the CPAs out there, like who are well qualified to run the family business. That's not my intent. But it does become, very, I would imagine they need to look outside to get some expertise and be able to give the better business perspectives. And that's where you can come in and give that insight.
Exactly. And you're right. Like a lot of them are like, wow, I don't invest in myself, or I don't invest in training for my business. But I always ask them, what is it costing you not to?
Correct.
Right. So whether it's small business succession and getting the next leader ready, or you've put a new sales manager in place and they don't really know how to lead other people, like it's costing you money to make those mistakes. Investing in your business pays off.
The question. And you're also a TEDx talk speaker as well, too. That has to be, and you have over 2 million views. And I always am amazed with people who are actually able to motivate. And this is a two-legged conversation, two-stool conversation. Number one is, I think it's fascinating when people attend speeches, but then also people who just attend them but don't act on the advice that you're giving, right? Because they come, and I say this in kind of tongue in cheek, they come with the binder, they come, really well dressed, fresh haircut, whole 9 yards. And then you see them a year from now, and then you ask them, how did you act on the things that I told you? And they say, well, I'm still kind of, thinking about it, right? How do you get people to what's that conversation like with those people?
Well, that's where coaching comes in. There's learning and taking in information, and then there's actually implementing. And most of us don't implement without accountability or guidance or a structure to make it happen. So that's how coaching works.
Absolutely.
But I mean, then I've had the other example. Like I had someone come up to me 5 years after they saw me speak, and I didn't even know they had been at that speaking engagement. And they said, because of you, I sold everything and I moved to North Carolina, and I started no, it wasn't an Airbnb. Oh, a bed and breakfast. That was a dream. And I had no idea that this person had even been in the audience. So there's the opposite too of like,
Beautiful.
People do take action, but it's just human nature. We just take in information, we're inspired for a minute, and then the inspiration disappears. So, there's a distinction between being inspired and really implementing what you're doing.
The question. You spoke 3 different languages by your mid-20s. I haven't mastered the English language yet. How in God's name did you do that?
Well, when you're 5 years old and your parents moved to Venezuela, which, so I learned Spanish really quick. I already knew English. I learned Spanish really quickly. And then when I came back to the United States at 12 years old, they put me in a Spanish class, which was like putting someone who speaks English in an English class. It was ridiculous. So I took French. And I studied French. So that's how the languages happen. And then when I was in college, I studied Chinese, but that was all memorization. So it's gone,
That's really tough. That's really, really tough.
It is, because we don't have anything to compare it to. It's not a Latin-based language. So it's all memorization, and it's tough.
When I was I had the Pimsleur app and I was working Spanish, but I think the key, man, if you don't work on that almost every other day, it flies off the memory bank really quickly when it comes to
It
learning.
does. It does. I mean, I mean, Spanish is very phonetic, like what you see is what it is. Like there's not a lot of tricks. It's very straightforward. But still, I mean, any language, if you don't learn it young,
Oh my goodness.
then you have to practice all the time.
Yeah, I was working Dutch for a little bit too, just because I was like,
Oh,
I was just curious because I was like, how many people have actually learned, Dutch isn't a very big language, obviously over here. I was trying to, just learn it just for my own curiosity, and it was, when you're almost funny because you're in your living room or your bedroom in the mirror, and you actually have to look corny saying some of these words, right? Overemphasize it, like, and you're like, okay, I'm
yeah.
gonna look silly here, and then your kid's staring at you while you're making these facial expressions. You're like, Daddy's trying to learn another language. Sorry. So I thought that was kind of funny. So I was also looking at some of your Instagrams, and I saw a very poignant quote that you said, and it was from Mother Teresa, and I don't want to butcher it. So it said, "We don't do great things; we do small things with love." I'm kind of paraphrasing that a bit.
Yeah, we don't do great things. We do small things with great love.
Beautiful. Yes. Yes.
And
And
I love that quote because, I work with people to figure out what they want to do with their life sometimes. And, people can really suffer over, what am I meant to do? And I want, God, the universe, whatever, to give me some big mission. And
yeah,
like, if you look at Mother Teresa's story, like she didn't set out to be a saint. She just picked up a sick person in the street and said, this is unacceptable that they're dying in the streets, so she did a small thing with great love. It's not like, oh, I'm going to do this and it's going to turn me into a superstar.
correct.
Right. And it's kind of like my story too. Like I didn't set out to like do TEDx talks and write books. I just found something that brought me purpose, brought me sense,
It's amazing.
a sense of, a sense of purpose, and followed one step in front of the other. So we don't do great things. We do small things with great love. And it's such an easier way to accomplish.
Yes, it is. It's more, and it's much more personal. And I've always, been fascinated by when you say that you catch people at that stage in life when I need to find my purpose, because I think that what happens is that people go on autopilot, right? You're 15, 16, you get your first job because you want to buy a car, you need some, spare money in your pocket, and maybe you're gung ho, and then reality starts to set in when you have to quote unquote pay the bills, right? And so then it becomes, instead of pursuing what your passion is, it becomes almost like a day-to-day survival tactic, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so then it becomes, well, I'll have to put that aside because my dreams won't make me the lifestyle that I would want if I was doing the traditional path. And I
Right.
think that one of the purposes of this show is that you can have a nonlinear path to success, and you can reach out to a coach such as yourself and find that drive and that purpose to get that out of you to pursue those things.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always, and I don't make people jump off the cliff, so to speak, and like join the circus and run away. It's like, I'm a realist, but at
Yes.
the same time, I often say that coaches live in the land of possibility, right? So if it were possible, what if it could happen? What does that look like? What action do we need to take?
For sure.
And, I find that when people start seeing a lot of luck and synchronicity, like you're on the right path.
Yes.
Like when it just, you think of somebody and they call you, or you run into somebody and it ends up being a great lead on something, like that's when you're on the right path and you just keep going. And then when it's not working out, do you quit? No, sometimes you have to pivot, you have to adjust, or the timing isn't right. Everything isn't always a straight line to, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
No question.
But as long as you still feel a sense of purpose about it, it's worth doing, even if it ends up being a side gig.
Right. When you work with those small businesses and medium-sized businesses, do you find it, are they receptive to feedback, insight, criticism? What's the stages involved with that? Is it like a discovery call? Then it's going to be, whether it's financials, HR, retention, sales goals. Are there specific measurables? I mean, obviously businesses can vary, but what is the onboarding process for coaching?
Yeah, we'll have a discovery call to see, what are the pain points in the business, and, is coaching with me the right solution? And then we set out with 90-day goals, so what do we want to see happen in 90 days? Whether it's a bottom line number, whether it's hiring, whether it's, SOP, standard operating procedures, or, whatever it is we're going to measure this by. And so the client comes up with, what is success going to look like? And then it's my job to get them there.
Absolutely.
Right. And so, and the thing about coaching is, by definition, we're not supposed to be giving people the answers. We're supposed to be asking questions, helping them come up with their own answers. Right. But, when you have 32 years of experience and you've worked with hundreds of business owners or hundreds of executives, like, there's some advice giving, but right. But, mostly it's just helping people, not everyone comes 100% coachable either. Right. Like, right. I mean, I don't want to work with anyone really stubborn, because that's not worth it to me. But, people need to expand their minds sometimes. They might see things a particular way and they're not willing to look at it another way. Yes. When you talk about family businesses, I mean, like, you have all these family dynamics and relationships have to be worked on, so it's never boring. There's always something new that comes up. Like, over the years, when I think I've got it figured out, something will come and surprise me. So I just have learned to be humble and, like, I don't know. Right. We're going to find out together.
That's beautiful. What I find fascinating about, that too, is that when you're going through those stages, you're finding out, I mean, you may immediately know exactly what the pain point is, and it could be staring them in the face. Maybe they just never said that to that person because that's their dad, their uncle, their brother, right? And they just like, I can't say that, but the coach that we brought in will be like, this is why you're failing at this. And it's not
right.
Right. And, you live with them. They're, it becomes a very hard perspective to say certain things, even in a business, right? And so I think that's fascinating. And then the other part of it too is, for people or companies who think that they don't need coaching or evolution of that, I mean, did anybody ever think Blockbuster was going to go away? Right.
Right. Exactly.
Did anybody ever
or
think
Kodak, right?
Oh
Film.
God, right.
One of the biggest companies that ever existed, and it's
unbelievable, right? And so now, and then you have all these hardware companies that now have to pivot to cloud and software services because, home PCs are the market's pretty much gone, right? The prices substantially dropped. So it's all about evolution when it comes to these particular products and services that are being offered. And I don't want to overtalk you, but now small businesses, you realize that you have to compete globally in ways that you didn't have to compete before.
Yeah, and now we've got AI, and you've got to worry about how that's going to impact whatever it is that you do.
Right.
Like when I think about, people who hung in with printing businesses. I mean, we still need printing, but not at the same level that we used to do it.
Without question. Without question. Do you what is the introduction to AI with some of these companies that, like even like restaurants, right? A lot of before, COVID, that awful situation, a lot of restaurants did not do delivery or take digital payments, right? They were like, we don't want the merchant fees, etc. And then next, it became a matter of survival. And now they have to offer those services,
right?
Because people are accustomed to that. What's it like bringing a company on board that's, kind of in a Luddit situation, so to speak?
Well, it's again, showing them what are you losing, or what is it costing you to be doing it this way, right? So, that cost benefit ratio is really important. Right. And you've got to pivot. I mean, I feel bad right now for graphic designers and writers and anyone who has spent years with those skills, because that's the first thing that's being replaced by AI.
Oh my gosh, it's that's a rough one, right? And then you hear all these stories about all these college graduates, who suddenly when they want to get their first entry level software job now in particular,
right? It's not there. Right. I mean, it's like my kids are in the arts, like they followed both their parents who were in the arts, which we didn't mean for them to do. Yeah. And honestly, like, they are not any worse off than graduates right now, because the entry level job market is the worst it's ever been. It's really, it's horrific. So, I've been saying for decades that everyone needs to be an entrepreneur. Like, it's just the way, even if you work in a company, you have to think like an entrepreneur, because that's where the opportunities are. That's where the innovation comes from, but schools still train you to be, someone who follows the trajectory. I mean, school was created to create factory workers. School was created to create corporate workers. So education needs to catch up with what's really happening in the world. I mean, I can get on my soapbox about this.
Like as I got older and like started actually like looking at perspective and the way they're intertwined themselves, like it's almost like a pipeline, right? Like they've created like their own little funnel system, and you're part of that funnel system and don't even know it. Like you literally have no, like you will willingly go to the counselor, then go to fill out the information to go to the school and then get the internship, and you're actually being programmed in real time and you don't even.
I mean, it came from the Industrial Revolution. I mean, it came from a long time ago of like, we need people to do these certain things so that they, fit the mold. And that's, that's changed so much. And that's why I love teaching people how to be entrepreneurial.
I guess the small feather in my cap was, if I would have told you I was going to start a podcast, I've started to get part of the conversation is when you talk to people who are entrepreneurs and then you try to say you want to do something yourself, and then they start asking you questions about what you're doing, when you're doing it, and then you start hemming and hawing, that's a very awkward moment, right?
Yeah.
So for people who are listening, I interview people who have created great things, but my podcast is the one thing I can sit back and say, hey, where's your show? Oh, there's the link. Here's my website. Like it's the little things that can make the conversation to continue to evolve, because when you can say that, people know you're serious, and it's the work you do when nobody's looking that really shines.
Right. That's what makes the difference.
That's what makes the difference. It really does, And so my last question is that what's it like to talk in front of like NASA?
Well, I got to remember that most of those people are probably way smarter than I am IQ wise, but not EQ wise, not emotional quotient. So I knew I taught coaching skills at NASA, right? And I knew that I was bringing in something that they didn't know much about, right? The soft skills side, the getting along with people side. And so we kind of met in the middle. It was really great. That was just I have a plaque on my wall from them, and it's like really a proud moment. It's right next to Oprah, my NASA plaque and my Oprah plaque.
That's absolutely amazing. I mean, I'm still the movies and the shows depict a very stoic, I don't want to say cold, but very. It doesn't seem like like a warm and fuzzy. I need you to open up and take criticism, because I mean these are highly math, science, the best of the best.
Right? And they think very differently. They think very linearly and very logically. And I was there to kind of break that pattern. But they really were in the game with me. Like they were very malleable. And I remember I teach questions in a particular way, like how to ask questions. And they were like, wow, these don't have any wiggle room. These are like, these are really cool. So it was a good experience. I didn't have a lot of people sitting there with their arms crossed judging me. It was great.
Yeah, I just picture a bunch of guys in white shirts, all with the same haircut, the same glasses, the same,
and the little pocket protector, right?
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely, right. And then just with the stoic look, and then even like programmed to laugh, right? Like this is like so it just that's just in my mind. I'm like, that has to be a once in a lifetime experience.
It truly was, and I don't know if I just got them on a good day or what, but they were great. They were great.
I've always asked every guest this, and obviously you were very successful. Long before I was fortunate enough to interview you. But for the purpose of this show and the purpose of people listening of this show, where can people find Laura Berman Fortgang?
If you can spell that name and you Google it, I'm the only one. I'm LauraBermanFortgang.com. And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all the platforms. I'm Laura B. Fortgang on Instagram if you're on Instagram.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely I hit the immediate follow button, because I think, just briefly, when you start following people who are positive and successful and have a mission and are authentic about what they do, your mind starts to change, right? And it's a beautiful, eye-opening experience. And, this podcast has made me a better person, because I get a chance to talk to people who I would normally never get a chance to. And, it's always an honor to talk to people like yourself, because that lets me know that the work that I'm putting in is worth it.
Yeah, I'm delighted to be here, and congrats to you. I mean, it's no small feat to have a podcast. So well done. Bravo.
Not at all. Anybody who think it's easy, try it after a week and let me know how it works out.
Exactly. It's a lot of work.
Absolutely, it is. Always a pleasure to have guests such as yourself. Thank you, listeners of the T.R.O.N podcast. Hit the subscribe button and look forward to more episodes with guests such as yourself.